All right, verses 3 and 4. Writes, and he says, we ought always to thank God for you, brothers and sisters, and rightly so, because your faith is growing more and more, and the love all of you have for one another is increasing. Therefore, among God's churches, we boast about your perseverance and faith in all the persecutions and trials you are enduring. Now, as in most of Paul's letters, he starts by giving thanks for the believer's devotion to Christ. He starts out being thankful for the people in the churches. But as we'll see, the tone of this letter is more formal than 1 Thessalonians. It seems that Paul's emphasis in 1 Thessalonians was to reaffirm his relationship with those believers. And now here, after reaffirming that relationship, he says, there are some things that I want to make sure you get right. There are some things that we need to straighten out. Okay? So it's kind of like 1 Thessalonians is, I love you, and 2 Thessalonians is, but there's some things that we got to talk about. And Paul gives thanks here for the Thessalonians because even in the midst of persecution, they are growing in faith and they are growing in love. And I know we've talked about this. What are some other words you would use for persecution? Okay, maybe ostracized. What else? Hardship. Okay. Abuse, mistreatment, unfair treatment, neglect. Okay. Okay, maybe overbearance, distress, disappointment. Yeah, what were some of the things that they did to Paul and his companions? Beat him, whipped him, chased him out of town, stoned Paul, dragged him out of the city, thought he was dead. Prison. Yeah, all of these things. So, in the midst of pain, in the midst of abuse, what Paul says here is these Christians in Thessalonica were growing in faith and they were growing in love. What usually happens when a person is abused and mistreated and persecuted and suffering? Maybe lose faith, right? Yeah, God, this is unfair. This isn't right. I didn't sign up for this. You know? I want to quit. What the person told me was God has a wonderful plan for your life. You know? And what is this? And have you ever tried to help a wounded animal? What do they usually do if you try and help them? Yeah, exactly. And so here's a church of wounded animals. And you know what Paul says? I know that you're following Jesus because even though you're wounded animals, you're becoming more loving. You're growing in your faith. And so even though they are a new church and even though they are new in this Christ walk, there's a lot that they're doing right. A lot that they're doing right. So he gives thanks for the Thessalonians because in the midst of this persecution, they're growing in faith and they're growing in love. And as he says in verse 4, the reputation of the Thessalonian church has spread because they are living out their faith in the midst of persecution and trials. So this is a rhetorical question. What does that mean? Don't answer it out loud. Okay? Rhetorical question. So, what is your reputation? What is your reputation? The reputation of these Thessalonian believers was that in the midst of all of this hardship and suffering, they were living out their faith and they were becoming more loving. Okay, another rhetorical question.